Not every story begins with a perfect plan. Sometimes fate chooses an ordinary night, an empty room, and an exhausted cleaning lady with a baby in her arms to bring about a twist we never saw coming. And that's exactly what happened with Veronica, a single mother who swept marble hallways in the dead of night, invisible to everyone but one. On that rainy dawn in Belo Horizonte, powerful businessman Rafael Montenegro, CEO of a logistics empire, saw more than a sleeping employee. He saw strength. He saw courage. He saw his own humanity reflected in the eyes of a child. And there, amidst computer cables and makeshift diapers, something inside him began to change, and not a little. This isn't a fairy tale. There's no Prince Charming, but there is rescue. There's no red carpet, but there is restored dignity. And instead of magic, there's real empathy, a connection between opposing worlds, and a transformative presence that turns everything upside down, for the better. Get ready. What began with a cleaning job and a quiet cry in the back of the office will show you how life, when it wants to, finds a beautiful way to start over, even when all seems lost. It was around 2 in the morning when Rafael Montenegro, CEO of Logprime, decided to return to the company's headquarters to retrieve a forgotten contract. Rain was falling heavily over Belo Horizonte, and the parking lot was deserted. As he entered the building, the silence enveloped him like a cold blanket. But it was as he passed the meeting room that he stopped in surprise. In the corner of the room, wrapped in a thin blanket, Veronica, the night cleaner, slept with a baby in her arms, shielding him from the cold with her own body. The scene shook him. Rafael, accustomed to making million-dollar decisions in seconds, stood there, staring at the woman who, even exhausted, remained alert to her daughter's well-being. For a moment, he forgot about deadlines, numbers, and reports. Something about that image awakened a long-dormant empathy in him. It was as if, for the first time in years, he saw someone beyond the walls of his corporate bubble. He didn't wake her. He just watched. The sound of the rain mixed with the baby's soft snoring created an almost sacred moment. Rafael returned home without the contract, but with a heavy mind, and a restless heart. Who was that woman? What had driven her to bring the baby to work? Her image, so fragile and strong at the same time, was indelible in his mind. Veronica's silent presence had left a mark. And it was there, on that seemingly ordinary night, that an invisible but irreversible change began. Rafael didn't know it yet, but that brief scene would begin a path of discovery that would transform him far beyond business. Because sometimes, all it takes is a single glance for everything to begin to change, from within. Veronica never had an easy choice. Ever since her daughter's father disappeared before Isadora was even born, she learned to be everything at once: mother, provider, caregiver, and warrior. She woke before the sun, braved 2 crowded buses, and even after hours scrubbing the cold floor of Logprime, returned home without complaint. There was no luxury or respite, only the quiet strength of someone who knows that quitting is not an option. Most people who passed by her didn't even know her name. She was just the cleaning lady. Invisible, like so many other workers who carry the world on their shoulders and rarely receive a thank you. But behind that tired appearance, there was a woman who smiled at Isadora even when her body was aching, who saved up her lunch money to buy a pack of diapers, and who, despite everything, never stopped dreaming of a more dignified life. She knew bringing her daughter to work was risky, but she had no one to leave her with. The neighborhood daycare was closed for renovations, and the neighbor who helped out also worked nights. So Veronica did what any desperate single mother would do: she improvised. She carried Isadora in a sling, wrapped in a worn blanket, and hoped no one would notice. But that day, what was supposed to be a secret became the beginning of a new story. The curious thing is that, until that moment, she hadn't even imagined that someone like Rafael had noticed her. I was used to being a backdrop, a setting. But her daughter's presence, that little piece of love sleeping in her arms, was what finally made her visible, and showed that, even in the toughest routine, there is a beauty that only true feminine strength can carry. The next morning, Rafael Montenegro arrived at work early, his mind still reeling from the previous night's scene. Something inside him wouldn't let him rest. For the first time, he couldn't simply go on with the day as if nothing had happened. The image of Veronica sleeping with Isadora in her arms haunted him like an unanswered question, and for the first time, he wanted to understand. He felt the urge to act. But not with speeches or spreadsheets, with real actions. Without revealing his identity, Raphael left a small bag containing diapers, wipes, and a new blanket in the cleaning room. Alongside, an anonymous note, for an invisible warrior and her princess. Veronica, upon finding the items, was confused. Then moved. That simple gesture, so simple, yet so caring, was like a silent hug in a world that only pushed her forward. For the first time in a long time, she felt she wasn't alone. The truth is, Raphael wasn't offering charity. It was something deeper. He himself had grown up in a difficult home, raised by a single mother who worked odd jobs to feed 3 children. And there, seeing Veronica, he recognized the effort, the sacrifice, the fear disguised as strength. It wasn't pity. It was identification. It was the recognition of someone who, somehow, knew exactly what it was like to live without a support network. Thus began a new phase, not only for Veronica, but also for Raphael. He, who had always resolved everything with power and distance, was now beginning to discover that empathy is as powerful a form of leadership as any spreadsheet. And it was in this silent contact that he began to experience something rare, a genuine desire to change, and to grow closer. After days of exchanging only silent gestures, Raphael decided to talk to Veronica. He invited her for an informal coffee in the company break room. She, suspicious, almost refused. But she accepted, not out of obligation, but out of curiosity. In that unpretentious encounter, what had been distance became a bridge. Raphael didn't use difficult words or a condescending tone. He simply listened. And in that simple act, something powerful began to blossom. Veronica, still with reservations, recounted parts of her journey. She spoke of how she had to drop out of school, the struggle to keep Isadora healthy, and the loneliness she felt even when surrounded by people. But she didn't complain. She spoke calmly, with the quiet pride of someone who's faced worse. Raphael was impressed by the way she narrated everything without playing the victim. She didn't ask for help, she just wanted to be heard, and that was new to him. Gradually, Raphael also opened his heart. He spoke of his childhood in the Venda Nova neighborhood, where he shared a room with 2 brothers and watched his mother work as a daily cleaner. He said his professional success came quickly, but at a cost. He became a shielded, cold, and sometimes completely alone man. Veronica listened to him silently, but with a look that said, "I understand." It was an effortless, unassuming connection. 2 opposite worlds suddenly found similarities. From that day forward, their relationship changed. It wasn't friendship, nor romance. It was something rarer, recognition. Raphael began to see Veronica as someone who taught her unintentionally, with her strong and humble presence. And she, for the first time in a long time, felt she could be more than a shadow in the hallways. In that space of listening and mutual empathy, something transformative began to blossom, one that would soon be put to the test. On that rainy Friday, Veronica arrived earlier than usual. Her eyes were puffy, and Isadora, in her arms, cried softly, her face flushed and her breathing labored. She had no one to leave her daughter with, and the neighborhood health center was overwhelmed. Even though she was worried, she decided to go to work, because missing work meant losing the day, and the little she earned barely covered expenses. It was the classic cruel choice of someone living on the margins. Raphael, upon seeing them at the reception, felt an immediate tightness in his chest. This was beyond normal. Without thinking twice, he cancelled his meetings and ordered a car to take Veronica and Isadora to his house. "There's a private doctor, space, and everything you need," he said. She hesitated, embarrassed. But looking at her feverish daughter, she relented. Sometimes, accepting help is the bravest act one can make. That night, Raphael's mansion ceased to be just a luxurious space and became a home, albeit a temporary one, for two lives accustomed to absences. The doctor he called diagnosed a severe virus, but nothing serious. Raphael stayed by their side until Isadora fell asleep. He made soup, warmed towels, and, for the first time in a long time, felt that his presence truly made a difference. The most beautiful thing was what wasn't said, the welcome born of instinct, of sensitivity. Veronica wasn't treated like an employee or someone lesser. She was cared for as a human being. And Raphael, without realizing it, began to break down the walls he himself had built throughout his life. That night, 3 such different people shared the same roof, and planted the beginning of something new there. A gesture that would resonate far beyond that moment. Inspired by everything he experienced with Veronica and Isadora, Raphael realized he needed to do more than just help out occasionally. It was time to transform structures. He began listening carefully to Log Prime employees, especially the women. He discovered similar stories, of single mothers struggling in silence, facing double or triple shifts, but who had never been truly heard. The reality was harsh, but invisible within the company. From there, he created an internal support space for employees with young children. He set up a small corporate daycare center, adapted work schedules, and opened a confidential channel for listening and emotional support. The decision surprised the board, but Raphael was firm: if we want productivity, we need to take care of those who produce. The gesture, far from being marketing, was a sincere step toward the welcoming approach he himself had learned from Veronica. But perhaps the most significant change was hers. Veronica was promoted to supervisor of the cleaning team. Not as a favor or charity, but on merit. Colleagues had already spoken of her dedication, punctuality, and respect for everyone. She now trained new employees with firmness and generosity. Raphael insisted that the recognition be public, valuing the person who had for so long been treated as invisible. Interestingly, it was Veronica who offered the wisest advice at that stage: it's not about giving, it's about seeing. And that became almost a silent motto within the company. Because once we start to see who's by our side, truly, there's no turning back. Transformation, when authentic, is contagious, inspiring, and spreads like a seed in fertile soil. And that's what began to happen there, day after day. The relationship between Raphael, Veronica, and Isadora intensified, but it followed its own rhythm. There were no promises or rushes. Everything was in the spirit of sincere affection, the kind that doesn't need a label to exist. Veronica continued her routine, now with more security and respect at work. Raphael, in turn, discovered a new kind of presence, one that didn't demand performance or contracts, just listening and sharing. And that, for him, was new. There were no passionate declarations or grand gestures. But there were small things that changed everything. Like Raphael dropping off children's books at the company daycare, personally selecting titles featuring black characters and strong mothers. Or Isadora running through the Log Prime hallways and unceremoniously hugging Uncle Rafa. It was in these simple scenes that the bond was revealed. The strength was there, in the details invisible to the hurried eye. Veronica, even without realizing it, had changed that man. She didn't ask for space, but occupied what was denied her with dignity. Raphael, on the other hand, learned that not all care comes from above. Sometimes, it originates from the bottom up. In the silent presence of this strong woman and the child who laughed freely, he rediscovered parts of himself he had left behind in the name of success. That relationship was, above all, mutual healing. And so they continued. No formalities, no imposed expectations. Just a CEO who learned to see beyond the numbers and a cleaning lady who showed, with discreet gestures, that all transformation begins when someone is truly seen. The world outside remained the same, but inside them, something essential had changed. And this change had a name: connection. The kind that can't be explained, it can only be felt. Time passed, and with it came new routines, challenges, and learning experiences. Veronica remained steadfast, now with stability, respect, and room to dream. Isadora grew up healthy, surrounded by love and affection. Raphael, in turn, became a more human, more present, more real leader. He didn't become a saint or abandon his career. But he learned that success that doesn't transform other lives is, ultimately, an empty success. They weren't a couple in the traditional sense. There was no wedding or vows of eternal love. But there was something between them that was perhaps even stronger: admiration, respect, and a rare kind of love, the kind born of sincere coexistence, daily care, and shared transformations. It was as if they had created, together, a new definition of family, one made of affection, trust, and mutual support, without necessarily fitting into a mold. Their story didn't end with a happily ever after, but with something even more beautiful: true new beginnings. Veronica went back to night school, encouraged by Raphael. Isadora won a scholarship to a bilingual school. And within Log Prime, inclusion policies began to be copied by other companies. The initial, almost invisible gesture now generated bigger waves. All because of a single mother who refused to give up. And perhaps that's the true magic of life: it doesn't deliver perfect endings, but it does offer unexpected paths, transformative encounters, and real opportunities for change. What Veronica got wasn't a fairy tale, it was something more precious: recognition. Because sometimes, what we need most isn't a happy ending, but someone who says, from the heart, "I see you." How many Veronica women have you seen today, without really seeing them? Maybe you passed them in the elevator, in the office hallway, or even on your way home. Strong, invisible women who carry the world on their shoulders without asking for applause. And perhaps, like Raphael, you're also so focused on what needs to be done, that you've forgotten who really makes it all happen. What if true transformation isn't found in grand projects, but in small gestures of recognition? This story reminds us that empathy isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. That human connection isn't a waste of time, it's a bridge. And that sometimes, simply listening, welcoming, and offering a chance can change the course of a life, and that of the person offering that chance, too. And now I ask you, what can you do, even today, to see someone the world insists on ignoring? If this story touched your heart, made you reflect, or rekindled something deep inside, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, you'll find real stories that transform, inspire, and show that behind every anonymous face, there's a power waiting to be recognized. And remember, sometimes, it all starts with a gesture. Simple. True. Human.